So it's been a busy morning. It all started last night around 9:30 when the U.S. Launched its first attack on Iraq in this war, but it was a target of opportunity, we are told, the target of opportunity intended to be Saddam Hussein and his leadership. We still don't know. The question that we have not been able to answer today is whether or not Saddam Hussein was actually killed in that attack.
And that is something that administration officials continue to look at. There was a briefing by a top administration official today at the White House. They're continuing to look into that possibility. There's also the possibility that this major assault, both on the air and in the ground, that is going to be happening, could be delayed as the U.S. Intelligence sources analyze exactly what happened there, whether or not Saddam Hussein might have been hit.
Chris, I believe we're going to go to the House of Commons because we've got some activity going on there. That's right. Jeff Hoon, the British Defense Secretary, is speaking, and he's answering questions in Parliament. Let's listen.
Military can play in ensuring the reconstruction of Iraq. My military advisors are at pains to emphasize that we are further forward in that way than we have ever been on any previous conflict, recognizing in particular the outstanding role that Britain's armed forces can play in this kind of peacekeeping operation. But it is important that we get through any necessary military conflict before we can fully turn all of our attention to that. But I assure him, as I assure the House, that a great deal of effort is being made right across this government and in cooperation with other governments to ensure the coordination of that humanitarian effort.
Tom Levitt.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. One of the criticisms that's been levied at military action in this situation...
All right, well, we've been listening to the House of Commons, but let's go now to CENTCOM headquarters. NBC's Rob Marson is standing by there. As we told you just a little while ago, officials say U.S. Air Force helicopter conducting operations has crashed in southern Iraq. What do we know about it, Rob?
Okay, John, the CENTCOM officials confirming for us the crash of that special operations helicopter at Pavlo, crashing in southern Iraq. Now, what we know is that none of the 6 crew members on board was killed. They were all recovered and returned to base. This reportedly happening before the attack last night, which just goes to show that things were already underway. Again, the special operations helicopter, a Pavlo, crashing in southern Iraq. The entire crew was recovered and returned to base. That's what we know here at CENTCOM. Back to you.
All right, let me just ask you one other question, because we've heard so much about these Iraqi missile launches that we've seen throughout the morning, and the air raid sirens have been going on in Kuwait City. We've just had one recently. Have there been any reports of any new Iraqi missiles being launched?
No reports that we've heard here so far. The raid, the warning that went off in Kuwait just a few moments ago was the last report we had heard about anything. There was some discrepancy earlier about missiles being fired at Kuwait. Whether it was 3 or 4, a British military official here told us that it was 3 that had been fired at Kuwait earlier, one of those being intercepted by a Patriot missile. But that's the latest information we have on that.
All right, Rob Morrison. Rob, thank you very much. And this is more information on the helicopter crash. Let me just give it to you as we're getting it here. This comes from the Pentagon. Officials say, as Rob just said, it was a special operations helicopter that had a hard landing in southern Iraq. And according to NBC's Kelly O'Donnell, no one was killed seriously or seriously injured. And as Rob told us, all 6 crew members were picked up.
It is 8 a.m. here on the East Coast, 5 a.m. out west. I'm Chris Jensen, along with John Siegenthaler. Giving you a break from your voice. I want to tell you what the headlines are, but first, let me get to a note, because this just was put in by Pete Williams, and I think it's important to note that as we are either at war, and we're hearing different reports about whether this is actually the war, the onset of war, or whether this was just the prelude to what will be the major assault, the FBI is stepping up its activity that will include enhanced surveillance of people in the United States who pose a threat. So we want to let you know that we're watching Homeland Security developments as we are watching what have been fast-breaking developments literally all around the world this morning. Let's start with those air raid sirens, because we have been hearing them in Kuwait City. We saw journalists putting on gas masks once again today. This time, just minutes ago, the all clear sounded, but earlier Iraq launched at least 3 missiles at Kuwait. U.S. Patriot missiles destroyed at least 2 of them. and no missiles hit their targets. Also, no sign that biological or chemical weapons were used, but that is a scene that has become familiar in Kuwait that you were just looking at. Meantime, U.S. ships in the Red Sea and Persian Gulf launched several dozen Tomahawk missiles into Iraq last night. The attacks were launched after a CIA chief, George Tenet, told President Bush that Saddam Hussein had been located. Defense sites in southern Iraq were also targeted. Iraq's information minister says one person was killed. And at CENTCOM, U.S. Central Command, more Iraqi soldiers are surrendering today. We're getting the word it's uncertain how many, however. And an aircraft described as a drone or a small plane crashed in the Kuwaiti desert. Officials are checking it for chemical weapons. Now, we will be recapping the headlines all throughout the morning. We will keep you posted as you're watching us here on MSNBC.
A couple of other bits of information. We're expecting a news conference from the Pentagon, possibly a briefing. It's still tentative. Could happen around 11 a.m. Eastern time. If we get that, we'll carry it live. We're also learning about the number of missiles. And let me just read you a bit of information we're getting from our NBC producer, Bob Windrum, who says that senior U.S. officials are saying 2 missiles were fired this morning at 4:30 a.m. This is one of the reasons they're putting on gas masks in Kuwait City. It was fired at Kuwaiti targets. It's unclear if the city or U.S. forces were the intended target here. Also, neither missile was a Scud. Repeat, neither missile was a Scud, but instead these were the Al-Samoods we've heard so much about. Short-range missile with a range of about 90 miles, and it is believed that this is an Al-Samood 1, not the Al-Samood 2 that we heard. Let's go to the Pentagon right now, and NBC's Carl Rochelle standing by with more on all of this. Carl?
John, I was just checking on a couple of things, and let me tell you some information that I just picked up from government sources who say that the level of attack, you know, we had been told for a long time that the first attack would be almost devastating in the aircraft and the missiles that were fired in. I'm told by this government source that the attack that we saw yesterday was just about the level of the planned first strike, that the level that it had been all along, that the only real change was the diversion of those 36 or so cruise missiles and the 2 F-117 aircraft into Baghdad to try to take out Saddam Hussein and some of his top military leaders. These sources say they are still not sure whether Saddam Hussein was taken out in that raid. Despite seeing him on television, they say that's no absolute guarantee that he was taken down. But the sources also pointed out, John, that it wasn't just Saddam that they were after. They were also after these military leaders who were in that house, and they assumed that they hit the target that they were aiming at, and that there is at least some damage to the military infrastructure, the hierarchy, if you will, in Iraq. John?
All right, Carl Rochelle. Carl, thank you very much. And just a little bit more information that we have from NBC's Bob Windrum on the missiles that Iraq apparently is firing at Kuwait. One of the missiles was intercepted by a Patriot. Apparently, the other one broke up in flight. There are varying estimates, Bob says, on the remaining number of Scuds that the Iraqis have, depending on intelligence. The lowest estimate is believed between 2 and 20 Scuds. But there are also those Al-Samood missiles, and it's unknown exactly how many Al-Samood 1s or Al-Samood 2s Saddam Hussein has. We're watching Kuwait and the situation there where the sirens have gone off several times today, and if they go off again, we'll go back to NBC's Don Teague. Now over to Chris.